G'day, if you're wondering what the drivers drove to the recent Qatar Grand Prix, I've got all the answers for you in just a moment. Plus, what they rolled up in at the Brazilian Grand Prix and the Mexican Grand Prix. So what did the drivers drive to the recent Qatar Grand Prix? I'm going to run through those in details. But first let me just say, why didn't I do videos for the Mexican and Brazilian GP? It's a little bit of a trick. For a start, Mexico and Brazil, no driver drove the car. They all had drivers, and in Mexico, they pretty much had one car for everyone. I'll run through that a little later on in the video. Brazil, there was a bit more variety, but I don't think anybody drove their own car. Why those two races? Well, they're a bit dodgy when it comes to security. But getting back to Qatar, both of the Mercedes drivers, probably not surprisingly, drove Mercedes-Benz. In particular, the S450D. Big, comfortable sedans, suitable for 4 or 5 people. But a lot of the drivers drove big SUVs, and that was definitely the case with the Red Bull drivers. Both Max and Sergio Perez rolled up in Nissan Pathfinders. Cars that are perfectly at home on the road or off the road. Although I'm not sure any of them actually got off-road at any stage, although there's plenty of off-road to explore in this particular part of the world. Next up, the McLaren drivers, and both of those had big SUVs, with Daniel Ricciardo driving a Toyota Land Cruiser GXR, a brute of a vehicle, plenty of these in Australia where I come from, and Lando Norris in this white Nissan Patrol. I thought the most interesting vehicle driven this race was Fernando Alonso's. He wasn't driving a Renault, he was in a Lincoln Continental, a classic American car. And his teammate Esteban Ocon, well, he was driving a Ford SUV, silver in colour, and this is an Expedition driven by Tom Clark, his trainer. I'll jump now to the AlphaTauri drivers because I thought their cars were also interesting. Not the standard stuff that they've been driving all year, and that's mainly Honda Civics. This time, they had Chevy Impalas, both of them. By the way, all of these drivers were staying at hotels no more than, say, 30 minutes from the track, and it was a very easy drive on a very wide highway for most of the way, except if you were unlucky enough to be arriving late in the day, which none of the drivers were, because I can tell you that Carmen Montero Munt, who is George Russell's girlfriend, got stuck in traffic big time on the Saturday. She was hoping to arrive for quali, thought it'd take 15 to 30 minutes to get there, but unfortunately one of the emirs closed off the roads for his purposes, so she was at least an hour and a quarter, maybe even an hour and a half, negotiating pretty much a closed road. What about the Aston Martin drivers? Well, true to form, they were driving the company's product. Lance driving this Aston Martin, and his teammate Sebastian arriving with Britta on a couple of days in this magnificent vehicle. For many of the races this year, Charles Leclerc has rolled up in a black Roma Ferrari, and he's kept the tradition alive in Qatar, once again driving this particular model, and his teammate Carlos Sainz was driving a Portofino. And the Portofino is one of Ferrari's more affordable vehicles, selling for under 200,000 UK pounds in that country. For most of the year, the Alfa Romeo drivers have driven company products, with Antonio driving the Giulia and the Stelvio being driven by Kimi. But this race there was a bit of a switch around. Antonio was driving a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and Kimi was driving the Giulia for a little bit of a change. The two Williams drivers have driven Mercedes typically this year, but for some reason this race they were both driving Audis. A white A6 for George and a black A6 for Nicholas Latifi, who was often in the earliest of all of the 20 drivers at this particular race. And that leaves us with just 2 drivers, both of the Haas boys. Mick Schumacher was driving a white Nissan Patrol, and he actually pulled up next to me at the lights heading into the track on Sunday, while his teammate Nikita Mazepin was being ferried into the track in a monstrous big black Chevy Tahoe. That's your 20 drivers from the Qatar Grand Prix, and I'll add a couple of team principals in here. Mattia Binotto arrived with Gino Rosato in this beautiful blue Maserati Grand Sport, and Toto Wolff in this S-Class S450. Let's go back to the Mexican Grand Prix though, because none of the drivers drove their cars in, none of the trainers drove. They all passengered in, and they had security driving these cars. Almost all of them, except 2, Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel, were coming in Chevy Suburbans. These are big cars. Many, but not all, had bulletproof glass windows. And these vehicles weigh between 4.5 and 6 tons. And the reason they were coming in those cars is there is a real security risk in Mexico, and a number of the drivers had a private security firm looking after security for them, where they would have people with two-way radios in contact with all of the drivers at all the times, and we would often know when the drivers are turning up because of that constant communication. It was a pretty serious affair, and even when they got to the track, some of the drivers were getting security escorts into the track, which at the time I thought was a little over the top. There weren't that many people around, and they were forming these V's with the driver in the middle of their 5-person setup.
If you travel a bit, get yourself one of these. This is a mount for your mobile phone. You put a little bracket on the top here, holds your mobile phone. This sticks to, say, the window of your car, and it allows you to keep your phone in view without you having to touch it. Ram mount, I love them. They should sponsor me.
Brazil is similar to Mexico, although for some reason they didn't all have the same cars. They had a variety, and I'm not sure any or many had bulletproof windows, because the trick with that particular race is, now that we're allowed back in the paddock and we get the better shots, in order to get out and get photos of the drivers arriving, we have to mix with the public. They don't stay very long in those cars, and you've actually got to see the car roll up to work out what they're driving as the cars just take off. There is no car park, unlike Qatar, where the car park's situated just outside the swipe gates. And thankfully some of the drivers in Qatar have their names written on their window sticker, so it's easy to go out and see who drove what. But let's go back to Brazil. Let's start with the two Mercedes drivers, Valtteri and Lewis, arriving in GLS 350Ds. And on a Sunday morning, Lewis rolled up at this particular entrance, obviously had a look at what was there, and that was probably 40 or 50 autograph hunters, and decided he would go via the other entrance. Daniel Ricciardo was ferried in a Jeep Compass. Lando Norris was in a black Chevy Equinox, quite a large vehicle, while Fernando Alonso in something a little more compact, a Capture from Renault. What Ferraris were the Ferrari drivers in? No, they weren't in Ferraris. They were both in Jeeps. And this is Carlos in a white one. Lance Stroll arrived in a Land Rover Range Rover, black in colour, got out quickly and scooted straight into the paddock. George Russell was once again in a Mercedes, which he's tended to drive to the track in quite a lot this year. This was a C180. And I thought the interesting one of the lot that I saw was Nikita Mazepin in a VW Passat. Certainly the Brazil and Mexico races are the exceptions when it comes to drivers coming to the track. That security risk is real, as you probably realise, going back to, what was it, 2017 or 18? The Mercedes crew were held up on the way out of the track late at night by some gangsters and got all of their laptops stolen from the car. And as such, the teams take a great deal of care when they come to planning their travel to and from the track, because it is the weak point, it is the time that they are exposed, and as such the drivers don't drive their own cars. In the Middle East, of course, it's supremely safe, and Qatar, as I've already mentioned, is fine for them to drive, as will be, I imagine, the next two races, Saudi and Abu Dhabi. If you've liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. I can tell you that all of my members get regular wallpapers once a month, along with raw race images. If you're looking for a great F1 gift idea for Christmas for your friends and family, why don't you get them either a digital image, and they can get it printed and then framed, I guess, and put in their home or their office. Head to prostarpics.com. If you're looking for one of my F1 driver photo books, they're available at kimillman.com, along with a range of merchandise. And for my best images live from the track and all during the week, head to Instagram and search @KimIllman. Thanks for watching, and stay passionate.